Boy, oh boy, we're here to do yet another rant. This one comes from Anime Watcher, and he's asking me how much media you're supposed to consume before you make a 3 by 3. Now, I am typically very against the idea of safeguarding favorites lists. I think favorites lists are just a way for people to say which shows they like at that given moment. So if you've only seen the 9 shows that would make up a 3 by 3, then that makes the 3 by 3. You know, the 9 anime shows that you've seen are your 9 favorites. I think, for example, when I was starting out as a bigger fan of anime, I'd only seen like 20 or so shows. I watched Venus Wars, I watched Bubblegum Crisis, and what was the other one when I was really getting into the medium? Uh, it was another one from the 80s. I can't remember the name of it. But regardless, I was watching all these 80s movies and OVAs and stuff. And at the time, those were my favorite shows. Cowboy Bebop, when I watched it on Adult Swim, was my favorite show. So like I don't really think saying that, you need to see all of these shows is particularly productive in saying which one is your favorites, because your favorites could change at any time. Like, if, for example, I all of a sudden realized I don't like Space Dandy because the men in it are too masculine or something fucking retarded like that, and then I said, okay, well, now my favorite show, now that I've watched Precure, is Precure or something. You know, that's totally fine. That change can happen at any point. And so to say that favorites are only somehow solidified when you have seen, 200, 300 shows, I think is misguided, because your taste can change at any moment. It's not like the fundamental change in your tastes 3 months from now is any different from the fundamental taste change a few days from now when you've only seen 9 shows. I don't see that much of a difference. And so, these people who, they go on A and they say, oh, you need to see this list of classics. Who determines that? Maybe you've only seen 9 shows and that's all you want to watch. Maybe you're not interested in the rest of anime. You're only interested in these very specific shows right here because that's what's going to appeal to you. That's totally fine. The rest of the medium doesn't have to interest you. And so I think to put this value judgment on seeing all these quote unquote classics is only trying to put a value judgment on the opinions of others. It's only saying, our opinions are right because a lot of people have said them. That's not what makes an opinion right. A classic is not a classic. A classic is only a classic because a lot of people have agreed that it is a classic, and a lot of people have been influenced by it if it's a particularly famous one. And so I don't see taste. I don't see taste in the sense of you have to consume all these things. Anime fans are obsessed with that. They're obsessed with lists and gatekeeping in the fandom just because you haven't watched certain shows. I don't understand it. I think taste is going to be ultimately defined by what makes you feel the most emotion. What do you, as an individual, respond the most to? I may try to consume a lot of different stuff myself because that's what I'm interested in. I made the video Analyze Everything. You have to come at art from different perspectives. You have to try and find interesting things. But that's my perspective. The perspective of someone else who only wants to see 20 shows and they've decided these are the 9 shows that are my favorites is just as valid as the guy who wants to go out and see 2,000 shows before they make their 3 by 3. So I think ultimately, when you decide what your favorite shows are, it comes down to the individual. It comes down to who feels like they're willing to say, these are my favorites. And sometimes people are perfectly fine saying that from the beginning. They get into anime and they watch Haruhi and they watch Gurren Lagann and all these great shows. And, those are their favorites because they responded really well to them when they first became an anime fan. And sometimes those shows remain their favorites. Sometimes they don't find anything else that tops them because the memories of when they got into the medium were just so strong that Haruhi kind of symbolizes this indulgence in the medium when they first got into it, and they symbolize that show with all the other shows that they first watched when they got into it, you know. Um, and so I don't think there is an established amount you have to see. I don't think there's any amount you have to see, period. Like, watch what it is that you like. Watch what it is that you care about. If that's less shows than Joe down the street, who the fuck cares? Ultimately, his opinion does not matter in the face of what you respond the most to. That is what makes a 3 by 3. It's not about the amount. It's not about some cultured standard that, you know, people on Reddit or 4chan come up with in order to sound better than everybody else. It is about, ultimately, what you care about. That is the point of anime. That's the point of any of this. When you start, you know, trying to be pretentious and then turn it into this weird you know, this weird entity where everyone has to get in together and pull out their dicks and measure it with a fucking string and then say, oh, mine's slightly bigger than you, now I'm allowed to make a 3 by 3. No, no, that's not what this is about. That's not what any of this is about. Anime, consuming anime is about having the most fun. It's about trying to find shows that respond well to you. Why else would there be so many different types of shows? Maybe some people, they get into the medium and they just like slice of life. And so they watch like 40 slice of life shows that are all the best ones, and then they're done. They got like K-On!, Azumanga, you know, Mitsuboshi Colors, etc., Lucky Star, and then that's, you know, that's their 3 by 3. That's how they feel, and they don't want to watch anything else because nothing else particularly responds well to them. Nothing else particularly hits their taste the way that those shows do. And it's totally fine. No one is forcing you to go out and do that. Sometimes people just have really rigidly defined tastes, and that's okay. You don't have to go out and watch absolutely every single show. The people who say that you do, the people who gatekeep and say, oh, you know, like I said, my dick is slightly better than yours, it's ultimately to make up for the lack of self-esteem, the lack of accomplishment that they have in their life in other ways. You know, they spend all their time in their room, and instead of trying to be self-aware about the fact that, you know, they don't feel that they have any kind of accomplishments, or, you know, they don't feel that they have anything that they can really cling to, they end up going on message boards and, you know, they act like they're somehow holier than thou because they've seen a show that has Christian symbolism in it, that somehow that makes it more deep and intellectual, even though ultimately the reason they liked that show was for emotional reasons, or in some cases entirely superficial ones, like I said, with, you know, trying to look better than everybody else. And you just have to take a step back for a moment and realize you are talking about anime, animated cartoons, often for children, on the internet. The, can you see the silliness in that? Can you see how that's a little bit weird? That this is animated cartoons, often for children, on the internet. There should be zero gatekeeping whatsoever in that regard. There should be zero standards for how much I should consume or how much I shouldn't consume in order to make a 3 by 3. A 3 by 3 is about your personal favorites. It's about the shows that you respond well to. And ultimately, that is going to be defined by your upbringing and your taste prior to that point, which is your personal business. They're your personal emotions. And those things should not ever be dictated by another entity who says, you have to see these shows, you have to be this way. People telling you that, in my opinion, is wrong. They're saying you're only going to be a good anime fan, you're only going to be an experienced anime fan if you do things our way. Well, who decides that? You're the only one who decided that. What authority are you to say that somehow one is more or less of an anime fan because they haven't seen certain shows. This attitude, this pretentious attitude around cartoons for children is just stupid. It's dumb. Like it doesn't make sense to me. I cannot fathom the things that these people are possibly feeling in order to get to that conclusion, because the only thing I can imagine is, oh, these people have somehow, not accomplished enough, and they want to feel like they're more accomplished than everyone else by flaunting their taste and trying to look cool. I do enjoy like pretend anime elitism as a joke on A and stuff. There's kind of a culture of pretending to be an elitist, and I think that can be really fun. But like the legitimate ones who say you can only have a 3x3 if you see Berserk, fuck off, die. Don't try and dictate the enjoyment of other people just because you like a certain show enough or you view it as being influential. Who defines that? How do you define that? Like, it's such a subjective thing that you're taking the opinions of other people and then you're just saying, no, no, you have to be a certain way. I don't agree with that at all. Ultimately, the amount of shows that you need for a 3x3 is about the subjective interest of the individual. It's about when the individual feels that they've seen the shows that matter the most to them. And I'm not going to sit here and try and rigidly define some kind of standard that people have, because ultimately I view that as disrespectful to the individual. The individual must have autonomy in their own taste. They must have autonomy in their own interests. And so for me to come out here and say, you can only see this many amount of shows in order to be a true anime fan, I think is just outright wrong. Anime fandom is about passion. It's about caring about what it is that you're talking about. And sometimes people who have seen 10 shows care more than the person who's seen 1,000 shows. Because the person who's seen 1,000 shows is sitting there jaded, and, their average score on Mal for a show is like a 2 out of 10. And they hate the majority of shows. But they keep doing it anyway because they have some kind of obsession with maintaining the idea of being an anime fan. They are obsessed with maintaining the community of anime rather than being interested in anime itself. And I think that type of mindset can be really, really toxic, that they only watch shows for the sake of talking to other people about them, that they're not really passionate about what they're doing. And so oftentimes people who start out can be way more passionate than anybody else. And you know, that's my take on applying this logic to other people. As for myself, the amount of shows that I saw when I decided what my favorite shows were was pretty quick. Like I had only seen like 30 around shows at that time when I started deciding what my favorites out of those shows were. And then ultimately over time my favorites started changing. But I've had basically the same favorites for a very long time. Like most of my favorites are actually shows that I saw before I got deep into anime. Like Grave of the Fireflies, for instance, I think it was like 12. I think I was like 12 when I saw that movie. And I only really got into anime when I was 13. And so, before that point, a lot of the stuff I watched, like Kill la Kill when it aired or Space Dandy when it aired, I was much younger. Now, Cowboy Bebop on Adult Swim, much younger. And so it's rare that I actually watch a show that reaches the level of the shows that I saw when I was younger, or the shows that I saw 1 or 2 years ago that have still been on my favorites list since then. It's rare that that gets changed just because my tastes are so specific, and I watch lots of shows that I like, but those shows that I first got when I started out are still the ones that I like the most upon rewatching. So I really don't think that you can have a set number, because if anything, me who's seen, if you count drop shows, over 200 shows, I don't think I would ever call myself someone who needs to see more shows just to have a favorites list, because no matter how many shows I watch, I still end up having the same favorites over the years. So hopefully that asks your question, Anime Watcher. Thank you for the rant.